Hello and welcome to the Company Chics Conversation podcast. My name is Lakeisha Copeland and I'm so excited that you all have tuned in today for another episode of the Confident Chicks. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Miss Gina. Miss Gina, I don't want to mess up your last name. Are you here with us today?
Yes, it's Jenna Talita. That's my name.
Okay, Jenna Talita. Got it. So,
Yes.
tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Um, so by profession, I'm a registered dietitian. I've been a dietitian since 2007. And I did a whole bunch of different kinds of jobs. I all the standard ones, that dietitians usually have, like at the hospital or long-term care places, or I worked with kids for a little while. Um, and I kind of found that I never really found my groove in any of them. They really weren't the kinds of dietetics that I ever wanted to practice. So I ended up getting a position at a drug rehab center, and I found that a lot of the people there, they ended up, as they were coming off their drugs or alcohol, um, they ended up resorting to a lot of either diagnosed eating disorders or a lot of disordered eating habits, which was like, if they didn't have a diagnosed eating disorder, but their relationship with food and body still was not the best. A lot of the folks, they would uh, either go in one direction of, oh, I have to be completely healthy and everything like that, and so they go in like this completely restrictive mindset, and they cut out really important things out of what they need, their bodies needed. And then the other side is that the other folks might have gone more into like kind of a numbing state, or they were also trying to like rebuild because they might not have eaten a lot while they were using their drugs or alcohol. So at that time, I really didn't have a lot of experience specifically with people with eating disorders. So I did some research, and I found out that intuitive eating was a very widely accepted program. It very successful for people who have eating disorders. So I read the book by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Rush, and they're the ones who originally developed this. And they're two dietitians, and they did a whole bunch of research and found out, that this would be helpful. And so I read this book, and it was incredible. Well, I was really going in to read this book with my clients in mind. I actually really resonated with this book for myself, and I
Wow.
had no idea that yeah, it was crazy. I had no idea that I had any sort of issues with that. I mean, I had, I guess, what feels very normalized. Like I had, my body image was kind of like so, and I did do my own, like, going on different diets and trying different things like that, um, and trying to play with my weight and all of that. But I thought, because that's very normalized in our society to do those kinds of things. But going through this book, I realized that I definitely had a lot of those issues. And I'm like, I'm crying the ugly tears as I'm reading this book. I'm like, oh my God, this is so much about me, you know? and and so it just, but the crazy thing was is that like everything in that book made everything make sense of why we have this relationship with food like we do, why we feel like, like you know fearful around food, or we feel guilty or out of control, or different things like that. And there was also stuff about like emotional eating in there. And the one part that was really interesting was the talks about like how our inner critic that we have inside of us, it can be kind of broken down into different kinds of voices or characters or whatever. And one of them is the food police voice. That's the one that punishes us, if we do something wrong, or if there's the nutrition informant, which is kind of like the snitch. And if you end up eating something, like you look at the nutrition facts and you're like, oh my God, this has X amount of something in it. And you're like, oh no, I'm gonna go tell the food police you're gonna be in big trouble for eating this, you know. And all of that is just like so much stuff that I identified with. And I realized that there was a point, a, a little prior to reading intuitive eating, that I actually did have a diagnosed, or well, an undiagnosed eating disorder, and I didn't even realize it. Um, that I I ended up going through this really tough divorce, and my husband at the time was saying some pretty rotten things to me. He was blaming his cheating on me and said it was because I was fat. And and so I really ended up internalizing that. And it just it was a really, really hard time. And so what I ended up doing is I was like, oh well, I have to be, in a smaller body, for to find somebody who's like a good partner for me, or to find you know to be successful with my career. um and um and and so I ended up putting myself on this ridiculous restriction. It was so ridiculous that I couldn't even explain it to people. And it was kind of a takeoff of a low carb, but I actually ended up making it like a no carb. And it was very, very restrictive. I could only let myself eat food that I made from scratch, and it had to meet this nutrition profile. It Sorry, there's something really loud outside. I don't know what it is. It had to meet this specific nutrition profile, and I couldn't let myself go eat with friends at restaurants or at their house. I Everything had to be a certain type of way, and I was obsessed with food all the time. I was constantly looking at recipes. I was sitting there fighting with the scale the whole time, um, and when my body did end up like changing and things like that, it still actually didn't really even make me feel that good. Um, uh, I was The only time that I felt good about myself was if somebody had complimented me, or if I was looking in the mirror and it lasted maybe briefly, like maybe the 5 seconds after that, I felt good about myself.
Wow.
But yeah, but after that, I still felt very bad about myself and not worthy, and I was always worried that the weight was not enough, and that the or that the weight would come back. And it was just like this. It was a very hard time, and um, it it was really interesting because at one point one of my friends had told me that I started to not look well, and I was very confused by that, because I was thinking that doesn't make any sense, because if I looked at the body mass index thing, I was still technically in the overweight category.
Hmm.
And I still needed to lose more to be in the quote unquote healthy category. And and it didn't make any sense. And so I kind of just blew them off and was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So uh anyways, and then now that I go back and I look at those pictures and I'm like, yeah, he was totally right. Totally right. I was definitely not well looking at all. And anyways, it kind of got to this point. I had gone on like this for almost a year, and it got to this point where it was Thanksgiving, and that was also my birthday. Um, and so I made all of the Thanksgiving recipes to match my restriction.
Wow.
Um, and, yeah, yes, and my family was kind enough to eat it. And and so one of the things that I had made was this thing that did not deserve to be called a birthday cake. It was absolutely disgusting. Um, it didn't set up like a cake at all. It was this weird goo thing. It was just not a birthday cake. And I forced myself to eat that thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is like crazy. This is my birthday. I want to eat my birthday cake, you know? And
Yeah.
so I ended up saying, okay, I'm gonna give myself the holidays to enjoy. And then come January, I'm gonna go and I'll get back on, what I was doing before. And and January came and went, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I mean, the idea of like having to go through all of that again, it was just torture. So that was like that was maybe about 6 or 7 months before I found intuitive eating, and I realized that all of what I was doing was really just disordered eating and not really healthy because it really was not letting me live. I was just so consumed by the scale and so consumed by making sure that my food looked a certain way. And it turns out that what I ended up having was something that's called orthorexia, which
Wow.
is, yeah, it's pretty much like healthy eating to the millionth degree. So, it wasn't that I was like not allowing myself to eat or that well, there was a part in there where I was like over exercising a lot. So there was some probably some bulimia mixed in because you can use exercise as a purging type of activity. But but it was very specific. My eating had to be a very specific type of way in order for me to be able to eat it. And so it wasn't a way of living. And
Yeah.
um and it didn't really give me what I thought it was going to. I thought I was going to be happier. I thought I was going to be more successful. And I thought I was going to have more confidence. And instead, it didn't. It just kind of added more stuff to the pile. And the people I ended up dating, they just ended up treating me, like garbage. They used me and didn't call afterwards, or they the business side of things, it really didn't end up doing anything. And it was just like it was crazy because I thought that the weight was gonna make all of that better, but it didn't actually make
Right.
that happen. So so yeah, so when I found intuitive eating, I was just like, wow, this is so
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so
Yes.
yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, because you did all that because of how your ex-husband made you feel, but
Exactly.
none of that had nothing to do with your confidence or your the
No,
image that you had of your body. None of that could heal just by magically getting the skin there, you know.
exactly, exactly. It's so true. And that's what tends to happen is that, we can get on these like what seems to be a health kick or whatever. And we can try to do all of these things and focus on our weight and all of that. But really, it's just because we've been taught as a society that doing that is going to make things better. And really, it's more of a distraction or it's a way of feeling like a way of feeling in control of something when everything else feels out of control. And I
Right.
definitely felt out of control at that time. So and it definitely was a lot of distraction mixed in there because I could put my energy and attention into that rather than focusing on, the pain that I was going through with the divorce and all of that. Um, it was very hard. So yeah, so being able to recognize that, that I was using that weight loss as kind of a tool to kind of shift my focus. It realized why that happens, and I find that that does happen for a lot of folks. Maybe not necessarily to that same degree, but they do use it for those kinds of reasons, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I
Yeah.
know you found it's this new approach to dieting, right? And you call it what now again?
Well, it's called intuitive eating. It's the thing is that it's actually not a diet. It's actually the opposite. Um, it's it's an approach of developing a better relationship with food in your body. And what tends to happen with dieting is that we get caught up in all of these food rules, and um, we can get onto this cycle that tends to happen, where we put this restriction in place. It could be the kind of food that it is, the amount, or when we're allowed to have it, and then the deprivation starts building up. And it could be a fast buildup or it could be over time. But it gets to this place where we feel like we can't take it anymore. And we might get this urgency to eat quickly or to hide while we're eating or to eat to a place of uncomfortable fullness. And then we end up getting the guilt and the shame that because we broke whatever food rule that was,
Right.
and and then the cycle starts again, and it's just this vicious cycle that continues. And where most people think that the issue lies within the eating quickly or eating to a place of uncomfortable fullness, it's actually the restriction that was originally put into place because none of that other stuff would have happened if that restriction wasn't put there. So, so when we can, so intuitive eating helps you break that cycle, and it's a way of recognizing like how we view food, how we approach food. Um, and we also talk about things like food being neutral with our food, where it doesn't hold any sort of morality to it. There's no good or bad food here. I mean, there are foods that do have that are more nutrient dense than others, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are good and the other foods are bad. It just means they have a different nutrition profile, and that we eat for all different reasons besides nutrition purposes. Um, so that's a big part there that I could make a whole nother episode about. Um, but yeah, but it dives into so many different parts there about like that food police stuff we were talking about and changing that voice to more of a curious and compassionate voice, rather than a judgmental, shaming voice. Um, we talk about learning how to recognize and honor what your body is saying. Not necessarily all of the noise out there telling you how you're supposed to eat, but instead listening to what your body is looking for at that time. Um, and we talk about things like body appreciation. And we also talk about not using the scale as a marker of success because it actually does a really bad job at that. And it does a very bad job at telling people what their health is, because people in any size body can have any sort of health issue. You don't necessarily
Right.
just just because you're in a bigger body that means that you're automatically, unhealthy, and vice versa. Um, because I've worked with a number of people, myself included, actually, but where people in bigger bodies, they actually are, you know, they are fairly healthy. And even if they weren't fairly healthy, it doesn't mean that losing weight would necessarily make those numbers different. It just means that they're in naturally a bigger body. Um,
Right.
and the smaller body people sometimes, well, a lot of times they end up getting overlooked because because they're looked at as healthy since they're smaller, but they might actually have high blood pressure or cholesterol issues or
Right.
various kinds of things.
Yeah, and
So,
sometimes when
yeah,
you're naturally smaller,
yeah,
you tend to eat everything without
it's
even thinking about it because you know that it's not gonna stick to you.
yeah, exactly. And you know what? Our bodies do like variety. So I will say that, enjoying different kinds of things is definitely worthwhile, but it still is worthwhile as well to check in with yourself because, if you find that you're getting to places where you're feeling uncomfortably full more often than not, it can be a little bit harder to function, like with your energy or things of that sort. Just feeling like indigestion, various things like that. And intuitive eating is about helping you feel good about your body and also helping it work as well as it's going to, and that could be varying degrees for different people depending on what they're dealing with. So, um, so yeah, and some other things that we also talk about too is like joyful movement. So it's like changing our relationship with exercise. So I know, like for me, um, exercise was always like torture, and I and I really just didn't care for it. And there were some things that I really liked to do, or that were maybe lesser torture than others. Like I could go and use the elliptical, and that was reasonable for me. But I wasn't really one to, do other types of uh, exercise kinds of things. Um, but instead, what that becomes now is more about joyful movement. So it's more about finding ways to move your body in ways that you have fun doing,
Right.
and you know, and not with the intention of trying to change like how your body looks or what size it is or anything like that, but just with the sense of, turning on some music and having a dance party just because you're having fun and dancing. I every time I make dinner in the kitchen, uh, I always have like I have a little dance party with my dog and cat and everything, and it's just like the funnest time ever. But doing various kinds of things that you just have fun doing that help you like enjoy life, rather than necessarily just doing it for the sake of, oh well, I have to do this. I should do this. I have to go run 5 miles because that's what I'm supposed to do or something like that. And if you love running, more power to you. Not really my thing though. But yeah, and then the last thing that we also focus on is gentle nutrition, and what that really is more about Um, what kinds of things can we add to what we're already doing, not necessarily at the expense of other things? So I kind of look at it like, what can we add versus what can we take away? Because it's so easy. Everybody always snaps to, oh, I got to take this out or something like that. And the fact is, maybe not. Um, but maybe you could, work on adding some different variety to what you're already having. Or maybe you could work on, eating a little more consistently or pairing some different things up together, rather than coming from a place of restriction, because that restriction tends to lead to more issues rather than it helps in most cases. So yeah, that's kind of what intuitive eating is in a bit of a nutshell.
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yes, it's definitely different because I know when you think of dieting, the first thing when people say they're going on diet or a health style change, they just start posting all these videos of them sweating in the gym,
yeah,
lifting heavy weights, and I know for me that's just not something that I want to do. I don't want to be so built where I have all these
yeah,
muscles. I still want to be feminine. You know what I mean?
I know. Yeah, there there is a lot of pressure to be smaller in this world. So I do understand that desire. I will say, and then this could probably be a whole nother other conversation, but there's a lot of sketchy history to where these determinations come from of like what our body weight is supposed to be. It's very, very sketchy, and there's a lot of racist roots to them and a lot of like misogyny to them.
Hmm.
And it's crazy. I honestly I had no idea about it till I started diving into this world here. But I know that, like, especially for something like body mass index, um, that was actually developed by a white European male. And he was not even in the health field at all. He was actually a mathematician. Um, and he just liked playing with numbers. And so he ended up realizing that people were filled with numbers. And so he collected like people's measurements, but the only people that he collected were other white European males like himself. He never collected any women measurements. He never collected other races. He never collected people from other countries or things like that. Nothing. It was just other white European males like himself. And that was the original height and weight tables that were developed. And there's so much to it, and most of it does come from this place of like eugenics and whitewashing, where like we had to be, you know everybody from everywhere needed to be the same size, which is it's just a load of baloney.
Right.
And there was a something that was done, like, so the life insurance companies in like the mid 1900s developed their own height and weight tables, and their biggest spiel was that the people who were past this arbitrary line on their tables, those are the people who were going to be at risk for dying sooner. And the only numbers that they collected were from their cherry picked clientele. Plus, life insurance is a business. They are there to make money. So, and to lower their costs. So if anybody was past that arbitrary line, that meant that they could either charge those people more money or they could deny them care altogether. And it turned out at the same time there was this large study that was being done by the National Institutes of Health, and they looked at 600,000 men and women and all different characteristics of their lives that could potentially affect their how long their life is. And it turned out that those life insurance tables were as much as 50 pounds off. And the people who were at risk for dying early were actually the people who were in the thinner bodies, the people who were in the BMI category of 17 to 21,
Mm.
which is it goes over the underweight and the normal weight category for BMI. The people who were at risk, the lowest risk for dying early, those were the people in the overweight category.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and so, but because there's so much money in, uh, people's insecurities and things like that, what we ended up doing was saying, oh yeah, everybody has to be this small in order to have, a long life and a healthy life and all of this baloney. And the diet industry uh, is a 70 to 80 billion dollar industry every year, and it grows all the time. And they are in the money or in the business to make money as well, off of our own insecurities. So they like repeat clients just like any other business out there.
That is so true.
And yeah, so they create these regimens or whatever of how you're supposed to eat, quote unquote, how you're supposed to lose weight. But the intention is for people to lose the weight regains back at no fault of the people, mind you. It's put onto us to say that it's our fault that the weight comes back, but it's actually there's more there's a lot of stuff going on inside of our bodies, a lot of chemistry and biology that's happening there to help us survive. And when our bodies lose weight, they freak out and they're like, "Oh my God, what's happening?" And they and they'll put different things in place to make sure that we live. And one of those things is that it will help us regain the weight and hold on to that weight so we stay stable. And so, but the way that these businesses work is that they want us to lose the weight in a short term, regain it back, and then come running back to them and saying, "Hey, oh my God, I screwed up. Here's more money. Help me lose more weight." And then we end up just having this vicious cycle that just ends up creating more problems than it helps. So so intuitive eating is about learning how to reconnect with your own body and help you recognize that your worth is more than your weight, and um and that we can live our lives in different sized bodies, and that's what our bodies are supposed to be. We're not all supposed to be in the same kind of body. We come in all different shapes, shades, and sizes,
Right.
and we're not all meant to be, one particular way. And if we were, it would be very boring. So, I mean, can you think of what do you think? Like uh, the neighborhoods where all of the houses look alike, all the
Right.
yards look alike, and you go in there and you feel like you can't even breathe because they'll like charge you for something or whatever.
Right.
um you know um and that's kind of how we hold ourselves, that we're all supposed to look like those neighborhoods, and that's not how we're supposed to work. There's so many factors that go into what determines our body shape, and genetics being a large component of that. So, so when we sit there and we're fighting with that scale, our bodies are like, "Hey, wait a minute, what's going on here?" So, so yeah. So, anyways, I would
Yeah.
probably talk their ear off. So,
But that's just because you're passionate about this. But
yeah, I am.
so so if you have one thing that you one last thing that you would like to talk to our audience about body imaging and intuitive eating, one last piece of advice, what would that be?
What I would say is that I would I would put on your questioning hat when it comes to any sort of recommendations to eating a certain way uh, looking in a certain type of way. I would put on your thinking caps with that and start asking questions. Where did this come from? Why is this supposedly the way to do things? I mean, sure, this person might have done this and their life is like this or whatever. It doesn't mean that's necessarily going to happen for me or other people, but where did that actually come from? And question that. And also question, is that really going to be supportive? Like, are you end up going to end up sitting there obsessing about food? Are you going to end up, not feeling good about yourself unless you look at yourself in the mirror or see a number on the scale? Um, because that's actually what tends to cause more issues than it helps. And there's lots of different ways that we can support our bodies and things like that without having to come from that place of restriction or fighting with the scale. So, and I just encourage people to kind of just think about that because I've been introduced to some things from the past that really kind of shook me up with like where their roots actually came from, like the fact that there's a lot of these racist roots attached to it, lots of eugenic backgrounds to things. um and it really kind of shook me because we are so much more than what our bodies look like, and and we just all deserve to take up space and be present in this world. And we don't necessarily have to be smaller in order for that to happen. Um, so just some food for thought for that. But
Right.
yeah,
Absolutely, I totally agree. Because we're not all supposed to be alike. Just like you said, that would be
no,
a very boring world. So, where can we find you? Where can we learn more about you?
yeah, definitely. So I'm on I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, it's your.nutrition.ally. Um, and same thing for Facebook, but I mostly do it under my name, Jenna Talita. So you could find me there. I do have this really awesome group that I'm putting together right now. It's called Permission to Exist, and the it's for people who are in bigger bodies, and it's talking about like how to implement intuitive eating into our lives. It's about learning how to appreciate our bodies no matter what they look like, and also just all of the fat phobia that we face in this world and the feeling unsafe in bigger bodies because of all of the jokes that are out there and all of the, you know, comments that people feel that they're safe to make. And just so much that being in a bigger body is not easy, and we can definitely feel this urge to be smaller so we can feel safer. This is a space where we can feel safe no matter what our body size is. So I would love for people to come check it out. It's a monthly membership. We meet weekly online and chat about these different kinds of things. And it's $99 a month to for a beta price. The price is is going to be going up soon. And yeah, so I would love to have you guys come check it out.
Yes, absolutely. It sounds definitely amazing, and it's definitely something that is needed,
Thank
especially
you.
yeah. So I do applaud you. That is definitely something that's needed, and I'm so grateful. I know when you was going through what you went through with your ex, but it was a purpose to that, just so you could come into this new awareness and to be able to help
Uh,
other people.
Thank you. Yes, I definitely agree with you there. It was a very hard situation to have to face, but
Yeah.
I do feel like there were lessons in there, and that I probably wouldn't have I probably wouldn't have gone through this if that didn't happen.
Right.
I wish it hadn't. I wish that he didn't. It wasn't a
Yeah.
jerk and said all that crap to
Yeah.
me, but at least I could recognize that, you know, that wasn't appropriate for how to treat me, and that I deserved so much better. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So, anyways, but thank you so much for talking with me. It was
Thank
really a pleasure being on here.
Thank you, and thank you so much for joining us. We definitely will have to have you back to go more into depth. But thank you for
Of
coming,
course.
and thank you all for tuning in. Bye bye.
Bye bye.